Virgo, courtesy, leading to steadiness of feeling. Hello everyone, and welcome again to this month's virtue practice, where we're really trying to work with the will practice of the virtue. And some of the virtues we have met in the course of the year have been familiar to us, more able to engage with, and others not so easy or not as natural to engage with as a daily practice. Now, the difficulty with courtesy, which is really connected to this politeness or good social conduct, or what is seen as a way of behaving with polite manners, the difficulty with the practice of this virtue is that many of those ways are unconsciously instilled in us. And so the practice itself can feel, in some respects, easy to do. But when it comes to really living into a will exercise, where I am willing it out of myself, we find that some of these conditioned ways of being actually act more like blocks. Because when it's difficult for us, we have to really will something, and yet when it's sort of we're politely conditioned to engage with people, or conditioned to engage politely with others, then it's not as easy to kind of find the awakened spiritual will that really gives the substance to the practice. And this is, in one way, a really useful exercise to look at all of the nature of conditioning in us. Because when we work with something like politeness, and many of us have been educated, conditioned to be polite, we recognize there's a unfreedom in the will, in the effort to have this living moral deed. Now, to do the good, to work with a virtue, is something that we've been trying to cultivate, but we're not trying to just act out of a deadened form, conditioned form, but really find what is this living moral deed, so that it cannot be pre-decided or predetermined, but actually puts me in this dynamic where I am seeking the living spiritual goodwill in the present moment. And this seeking of that living spiritual goodwill is really that turn from my will, which is my personal will, to the thy will, and to see this dynamic of the human being's capacity to engage through us the living goodwill, which has a very different dynamic, not just on my own being, but also on the world around me. So if I'm being polite out of a unconscious conditioned act, it does not change the conditioned patterns in me or the conditioned patterns in the other. But if indeed this living goodwill is brought through me, then the life of that alters these fixed materialistic patterns in our own soul. And it is these fixed materialistic patterns in our own soul that goes on to create these constructs of unfreedom and, in a certain way, limitation to everything that's possible for me to experience, because these constructed limiting forms place the veil over what I can do, who I can be, how I can live. And yet the spiritual world is asking for us to be in this dynamic, this living dynamic of the good, not a cultivated, conditioned, determined state that many religions in a way have indoctrinated into the ways of being good, rather than cultivating this possibility. And it's such an extraordinary possibility, because it really brings about this reality that the living spiritual world wants to take us beyond our limitations, because it's seeking to support true freedom. And that true freedom not to be limited by the constructs of your own personality, which actually only allow you, through that veil, certain experiences, certain realities. And as we penetrate into this possibility of living with a force of moral good that alters those patterns in me, and through me alters those fixed patterns in the world around me, we can see how this can change the materialistic fixed structures that are deadening the human soul. And these materialistic fixed structures that are patterned in us to such a degree that we don't even question the limitations that we live by, this is what we are attempting to overthrow in our own will as a part of our own development. And in doing so, we really are changing that in the world around us. Now, these kind of fixed forms, these materialistic forms, these materialistic patterns and agreements that we make are causing fixed, deadened forms in the world. And in the esoteric terminology, we think of this force as linking to this dragon-like nature. So as we begin to turn our attention to preparing for Michaelmas, we must also at the same time turn our attention to these fixed materialistic forms in ourselves and say, how is it that I can overcome or keep in their place, their rightful place, the materialism that lives in me, and not be so contained and limited by it that my world is made smaller, but our world is made smaller. So even though we might be approaching this virtue this month of courtesy with a kind of, well, that's an easy one, in fact, it's almost one of those virtues that puts us face to face with conditioning that is more obvious than some of the other virtues that we may feel that, oh, I don't really know deeply compassion or faithfulness, but actually I know politeness. I know how to do that. We all know how to do that. And yet this becomes the virtue that can really help us remove materialistic structures, limitations where they do not belong, so that the human soul can continue to flourish, can continue to become all that it is here to be. And so as we enter into this month's virtue, we are also entering into this preparatory picture towards Michaelmas and Michael's capacity to overcome the forces of the dragon in such a way that that the spiritual world still can support humanity's progress, even though these forces of materialism are growing ever and ever stronger. But Rudolf Steiner gave us this picture: when the greatest forces of materialism are at work, then the greatest forces of the spiritual world ever wishing to will to enter into human progress are also there available. But we become available for those forces, those spiritual guiding supportive forces, where we ourselves are free. So as we go towards Michaelmas, we really are working with freeing ourselves from our limitations, and in doing so, freeing where these materialistic forms are not serving humanity, but are rather killing the future. So hopefully many of you can join us for Michaelmas. We'll put the link below. And at the same time, this practice is a wonderful month to really check out what is this quality of this living free will, this moral deed that cannot be determined, but comes into relationship to the divine spiritual will.
Behold the worlds, O soul. Let the soul take hold of worlds. Let the spirit lay hold of being. Work out powers of life. Upon will experience build. In blossoming worlds put trust. O soul, comprehend the beings. And just bring your attention to a streaming movement from above the head to the crown and down the front of the forehead and face, down to the neck and chest, streaming into the heart.
Virgo. Welcome to this month's constellation, the zodiac of Virgo. And maybe you've just arrived at this site and wondering what you're about to do. So we're working with eurythmy, and if you don't have an understanding of eurythmy, you can go back to Astral 2024, where you'll find an introduction to eurythmy. And if you've just arrived at this astral arc, you may also want to go back to 2023. Lisa Romero speaks about the zodiac signs and their virtues, because each one has a virtue. So by going back there you will understand a little bit more about what we are doing. Lisa also brought into that practice a meditative exercise to help engage us with each of these virtues. So 2023 was a thinking practice, and now we're going more to a will practice. So really putting it into our will, working with these virtues, which can be quite challenging for some of them. So if we begin with Virgo here today, the colour is indigo. And I spoke to one of my colleagues who's an art therapist, and she said that indigo is a very, very warm blue. And that if you look at the mother of pearl, you will see that all the colours are involved in indigo. They're all there, maybe hidden. So I've got a mother of pearl shell here, and maybe you'll be able to see that there is this indigo shining there, and also all the other colours are there as well. And even if you look right inside, you might see a bit more of the indigo that's there. That just gives us a bit of an idea of this colour and the warmth that it brings to us. So this is the way we want to find our way into this gesture, by remembering that there's warmth that goes with it. Virgo also belongs to the feminine, and the body part that the formation of Virgo helps to bring in is that abdomen, and it's also enclosed in this area is the womb, the digestion. So this is this gesture that comes to the side of the body, pointing downwards. You can almost touch your body when you make this gesture of Virgo. And in between there's also warmth. So it's the inside of the arm that's coming around to this place here. So when I do this gesture, I need to bring the warmth, which also engages the heart, to the center of the heart, and the warmth there as well. So when I bring this gesture of Virgo, I want to find that warm quality. So it's a very inward gesture. And if you remember from last month, we had Leo, which was out there underneath the blue dome of the sky, and it was filled with enthusiasm. Such enthusiasm for that bright blue sky that we're under. And then this one brings a soberness. So it's really bringing us inside. It's the mother. It's the virgin. It's feminine. It, as I said, it also contains the womb here as well. So by doing this gesture, this beautiful inward gesture of Virgo in eurythmy, there's also a softness with the eyes that comes. I'm not staring out, but I've actually got a softness. My eyes are open, they're not closed. This is bringing this inwardness to this gesture, but also the courtesy, which is the virtue that we're trying to work with this month, which we are going to work with this month, is also a help to bring this inwardness and this absolute listening. And that listening also belongs to courtesy. So let's just have a little practice. I know you've probably been doing it with me anyway. So the right arm is just beside, streaming downwards, but again, you will still feel the warmth there. And then the left one is bent at an angle, and it's pointing towards this whole area of the abdomen. And so within here, fill it with warmth. And so we have to find that warmth while we're making the gesture. So here we go. Here's the warmth and the gesture of Virgo. And release. Now, shall we do that 3 times? But if you can turn your screen away, if you can manage to do that now, because I want you to find this inner mood, and if you're looking out at a screen, it's very hard to find this inner mood of Virgo and the warmth that needs to come from this gesture. So here we go. Virgo. Good. So hopefully you have felt some warmth doing this gesture, and the more you do it, the more you will feel that does work on your body as well, this warming capacity that comes about with Virgo. So I shall step to the back of the room and we'll start our practice for this month, which will be 3 of the ERO, 3 of the Virgo gesture, and then the streaming that we have at the end for that contemplation of the virtue of courtesy. And courtesy then leads us to a steadiness in our feelings. So that's really nice, isn't it? Okay, let's try this together. So remembering again that the eurythmy is making a bridge to the cosmos, and that we're allowing all these health-giving forces to rain back into us. So starting with the ERO. Virgo. And now streaming from the cosmos through the crown chakra, down past the third eye, down to the throat, to the larynx, moving on down further into the heart. And there we find this virtue of courtesy, where we can contemplate through this mystery center of the heart.
I am the one who shines through you when you